Hey everybody, it's Josh here. Today I'm going to tell you a pretty much guaranteed way to get a job in IT without knowing anyone, without having any kind of experience, and without having a degree. So let's get started. I've worked a whole bunch of different jobs in my career, from just kind of your basic help desk to like sysadmin to like doing automation with PowerShell. I actually kind of made the transition into security like back in 2017. So I was a security analyst, and then I did some kind of security analyst slash program management work as a vendor at Microsoft. And then now I work at King County as in local government as some kind of security program manager. Still kind of IT related, but I've had a whole bunch of different jobs throughout my career and interviewed a whole bunch of different types of companies like government and finance. And I've worked in Hawaii for a year. I worked in Japan for a short time on a base as a contractor. So I've kind of been able to develop this checklist or this framework over the years that's really helpful in finding jobs, especially for new people trying to get into the field. So for the method we're about to talk about, I actually had my wife take this and implement it and then find herself a job. I didn't make her do it just for the sake of it. She actually wanted to switch her career into IT. But the interesting thing about her is she's a non-native English speaker, so she had some kind of extra hurdles to overcome. But as I explain the method to you, I'll explain each step, and then I'll explain like exactly what she did in her case to kind of complete the checklist. So having said that, let's get started. So the very first thing to do in the process is to develop a base level of knowledge around information technology. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this, but what I would recommend is studying the CompTIA A+ curriculum. CompTIA is basically a vendor who provides IT certification, and they go to great lengths to do industry research to make sure that their exams cover like all the latest topics and whatnot. So you can use CompTIA A+ as a really good kind of baseline for the knowledge level that you should be at when you enter IT. I would also highly recommend trying to get like a really cheap refurbished computer or something off Amazon. So as you study, the things that come up, like as it's talking about RAM or hard drives or something like this, you can like actually practice on the cheap computer that you got and like take the RAM out and like take the motherboard out and like maybe take the CPU out and like reseat it and do the thermal paste and all of that good stuff. So I'd recommend getting like a dedicated cheap computer just for that, so you can get some hands-on experience while you go through your material. The whole point of this phase is to develop a base of knowledge, not necessarily get CompTIA A+. There's a bunch of different ways to develop a base of knowledge. Like for example, you could go to some community college classes that teach basic like hardware and software about computers, or you could have done a whole bunch of other things. I'm just recommending for your knowledge base, I'm just recommending the CompTIA A+ curriculum because it's well flushed out by CompTIA already, and there's so many resources available for online. The good thing about CompTIA, and especially A+, is there's a whole bunch of material all over the internet. There's a particularly good channel or a good dude who makes material for CompTIA exams. It's Professor Messer. If you haven't heard of him, I'll put a link for it in the description. And also I want to say, if you feel like you already have a base knowledge in IT, like you already have some kind of experience, or you already like play with computers all the time, you can just make a check mark and just check this step off and move to the next one. But before we do that, I just want to kind of explain how my wife dealt with this step. So in my wife's case, she didn't really know what she wanted to do exactly, whether that's just work in like help desk or something, or do networking or do development or something. She didn't have any idea at the time. So instead of jumping straight into A+, she kind of just took her time and took a couple of classes at community college. Like she took a web development class and then a couple of programming classes with Java. And then after the Java class, I think she started studying for A+. And CompTIA A+ has 2 exams, and she passed the first exam. And then she started taking another class at community college for Cisco networking. So she took Cisco Networking 1 and Cisco Networking 2. And then I would consider this a sufficient knowledge base. So that's kind of how she checked off her box. You can check yours off in like a similar way. I would recommend CompTIA A+ because it's straightforward and easy, but that's just how she did it. And the next step is to complete some kind of certification. I know like the first step kind of sounds like that, but the first step is knowledge base, remember, and this step is certification. You can have a knowledge base without a certificate, and you can also have a certificate without a knowledge base, like if you were to cheat or do something weird, but don't do that. In my head, certification and knowledge is like totally separate, and in my opinion, the whole point of a certificate is to serve as some sort of HR filter to get you an interview, or at least increase your chances of getting an interview. Since certificates serve as an HR filter, it makes sense to get a certificate that HR typically knows about. And for this, in my opinion, the best one would be CompTIA A+, which is nice because you can kill two birds with one stone. So if you use CompTIA A+ for your knowledge base and then you decide to actually get the certificate, that's two birds with one stone. You can also augment or replace CompTIA A+ with CompTIA Network Plus or Security Plus. ITIL is also another decent one you can use. But any of those, I would recommend, to be honest, I would recommend just doing A+. There's the most material for it, and you can probably pass it for close to free minus the cost of the exam, as in you probably don't really need to buy any extra material to pass it. And if you're concerned about being able to pass the exam, like, don't even worry about it. Actually made a video that talks about my strategy I use to pass IT certifications. I have a whole bunch, like 12 or 13 or something. But I describe like a rigorous step-by-step process that you use to kind of prime yourself for the information and then learn it and then be able to take the exam and pass it. So don't worry too much. Just do your best. It'll be fine. You'll pass. And getting on to how my wife checked off this box, the certification box, she actually started studying for CompTIA A+ first, and A+ has two parts to it, like two tests, and she passed the first one, and then she started taking Cisco at community college, and she's like, wow, I really like CCNA. So she took like Cisco 1 and 2, and then the pandemic happened, and then she just started studying on her own, and we got like a full lab for her, and then instead of doing A+ first, she actually finished CCNA first, which is like really crazy and not what I expected her to do. But I would say it satisfies the certificate requirement for this framework sufficiently. I would recommend A+ because it's going to take you like a fraction of the time as something big like CCNA. But she just wanted to do CCNA because she liked networking. Step 3 of this process after you have your certificate is to make yourself some experience. Now, if you already have experience, like you have experience doing help desk or something else, you can just check this box off and move on. But if you don't have any experience yet, you have to make some for yourself. So to manufacture your own experience, what I would recommend doing is look back when you were getting your knowledge base and your certification. Were there any particular areas that you found interesting, like when you were studying for those? For example, like when you learned about Active Directory, was that interesting to you? Or when you learned about like security or networking or cloud computing, was any of that interesting to you? And I would pick a topic that you find interesting and then kind of do a deep dive into it. So for example, I might recommend Active Directory. I say Active Directory because most large businesses use Active Directory and most IT professionals have used it at some point or know how to use it. So for example, if you choose Active Directory and you want to make some experience for yourself, I would recommend maybe just searching on YouTube for like how to build a lab in Active Directory. I actually have a video on this, but it's pretty bad, so you don't have to look at mine. But just search YouTube and like follow along with a tutorial for whatever it is you're trying to generate some experience for yourself on. Like build the environment, use it a little bit. And then after you're comfortable with it, I would make some kind of blog post or publication on LinkedIn or something where you teach others basic things on how to use it, like how to set up a domain or how to make, organizational units or how group policy works. Like make your own kind of blog post or publication just to serve as like some kind of tangible evidence that you have experience doing that thing, and then you can put that on your resume, and that counts as experience. That's how you get experience without getting a job. So what my wife did for this step, she did a couple things actually. Remember I said she was taking some like web development when she was trying to figure out what to do. So when she was taking web development, she actually contacted a company that she used to work for, and she's like, hey, let me rebuild your website for you. So she just like rebuilt their website in WordPress and then gave it to them for free. And then later when she kind of started liking Cisco and working on her CCNA, her experience was she built like a physical home lab with a whole bunch of routers and switches and like a rack and all of that good stuff. So for her, she used the website she made to check off this box as well as kind of her home physical environment. You don't have to do anything too crazy for this step. It can be anything like Active Directory. You can do something like Microsoft Office 365 implementation. Anything that you find interesting, just kind of like dive into it and get your hands dirty and work on it, and then make a blog post and publish that to your resume. So the fourth step in this process is to have a nice, clean, succinct, squared away resume. I really hate reading in general, especially like resumes and large blocks of text. So I just kind of assume anyone who looks at my resume also hates reading and seeing large blocks of text. So the way I tend to formulate my resume, let's look at this example here. The way I tend to formulate my resume, when people first look at it, they tend to look, you know, up in this corner in this kind of left side area here. So I tend to formulate my resume as to where they don't even really have to read anything to understand like what's on it. So for example, in this case, easy to see the name at the top and easy to see like a LinkedIn link. Certification is like right there. They don't have to like really read anything. If you look at it for like a second, you see like what it is already. If you have any education, just make it like really simple and put it right here. And then I would recommend putting your this is your manufactured experience right here. So for example, I said to like make a blog post or publication or something, say that you set up an environment in Active Directory and you published a blog post about it, like teaching other people how to do it, and or you made like a, you know, an average YouTube video describing the same thing. Personally, I would have all that stuff right here, like in the beginning, because it doesn't need, you don't have to read it to understand what's here. Like you're like boom, and you that half the page and you already understand like what the person is about without having to read large blocks of text or anything like this. And then moving on to technologies, people tend to do weird things under technologies. Like they'll just like rattle off a bunch of technologies like Excel, Office, like PowerPoint or whatever, you know, Nmap, Active Directory. But that's not really useful. It's just words. It doesn't really tell about what kind of experience you have in like what you've done. So like what I would recommend under, whether you call this section technologies or skills or whatever, I wouldn't list like, you know, 10 different things. I would maybe, for example, I would list like one thing and then really quantify what you did well with that one technology that you worked on. Because for example, if somebody reads this, like Active Directory, oh, they created standards for provisioning, blah, blah, blah. They talked about like PowerShell a little bit. After somebody reads this, it can be inferred that you already know how to use like the Office suite. You already know how to use like Word and Excel and all this stuff. And it can be inferred that you can already communicate well and do all sorts of other things. So if you have like a solid skill or technology and you describe it well, a lot can be inferred about you through like what you wrote here. So you don't have to like rattle off 20 different random technologies. And then for your experience, whatever it is, like working at Macy's, like whatever you did before, you can just, you know, make it succinct. You don't have to list every single job because people are not going to care about, you know, they might, but they're not going to care about like if you had like a 10-year career at like Safeway as like a cashier or something. It's cool, but you don't have to write too much about the stuff that's not relevant. Maybe just put like your last like 1 or 2 jobs or something. And then when you talk about like what you did at that place, for example, we have a delivery driver here. Don't put like create like cooked pizza and like delivered pizza and answered the phone, because that stuff is like really obvious. Like obviously you did that stuff if you're a driver. So what I would put, I would like put stuff that stood out about like what you did there. So for example, if you got any kind of awards, so in our case we currently rank number 2 in deliveries per hour. We ranked number 1 for order accuracy. Like I contributed to training. Like put this kind of stuff. Don't put like obvious stuff or like you know, collaborated with teammates or whatever, because it just takes up space and it's just extra words to read. So like the whole point of this resume is to just make it as succinct, as short and concise as possible. And then of course, don't forget to spell check your resume. I would recommend using Google Docs because they have a really good spelling and grammar checker, and it's totally free for anyone. So don't forget to do that. But yeah, feel free to use this. Again, I'll put the link in the description. So for step 5, now that you have your certs and your resume and everything squared away, now is the time to go to LinkedIn and make sure your LinkedIn's like totally updated and flagged for looking for work. And then go to all those other job sites like Indeed, Glassdoor, Career Builder, Monster, and just fill out profiles on all of those websites and then mark yourself for open to work. We're also going to be applying to jobs too, but updating your profile on all of these sites and marking yourself as available for work allows the opportunity for other recruiters to find your information there and then contact you directly without you having to necessarily go and apply to them. So now that you have all your profiles filled out, it's time to start actively applying for jobs. So what I would recommend, I tend to use, there's a lot of sites, but I tend to use Indeed just for my kind of initial search. So for you, as you're new to IT and like getting into IT, I would look for jobs with keywords such as you can use like CompTIA A plus as a keyword. So you can use like CompTIA A plus. You can use service desk, tech support, desktop support, or technician, or any of these kind of like support kind of centric keywords for your job search, because you'll be able to find a lot of IT entry level jobs with these words. So now that you have all your profiles filled out, it's time to start actively applying for jobs. If you're watching this during the pandemic, there's probably more remote jobs than there were a year ago, which is good news for you if you're just now trying to get into IT. I also want to say, if you live somewhere really, really rural, like you live out in the country, for example, in Walla Walla, Washington, with a population of 33,000, you might consider moving to a larger city just for your initial entry into the IT field. So before you say no and decide not to do that, if you live in the country, consider this for a moment. So say we live in Walla Walla and we wanna find some kind of job. So I'll just type like CompTIA A plus, and we'll look. And here it says we have like page 1 of 1, and there's only one job. So say that we, instead of Walla Walla, we just look in like the whole like Seattle area. By the way, Seattle, population of about, according to, I think it was Wikipedia, 3.4 million or so. So say we look in Seattle. So remember, in Walla Walla, there's only like one job with the CompTIA A plus keyword, just one. And in Seattle, 25-mile radius of Seattle, so you don't even have to live in Seattle. There is 29 pages of jobs, and then each page has how many jobs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. A whole bunch. I'll just say like 15. So 15 times how many pages? 15 times 29. I don't know. It's a whole bunch. 15 times 29. It's like 400. We'll just say like 400 jobs just for this keyword, just for relocating to Seattle. So you can imagine if you expanded your search from like Walla Walla to Seattle, and then Seattle to the whole Washington state, and then the whole of Washington state to like, you don't care where you work in the US, it's pretty much like infinite jobs at that point. So for example, like United States, find CompTIA A plus, United States. Almost pointless to do this, but there's a massive, 2,500 pages of like whatever, 15 jobs each or something. The point is, it's a lot of jobs. And I've actually done this before, because I live in the Seattle area originally, but I moved and worked in Japan. I moved there for a job, and I worked there for like a few months. The company was bad, so I quit after 3 months, but still I moved to Japan just because like I wanted to do a certain kind of work, and then I also wanted to go to Japan, so that worked out. And I've made the move from Seattle to Hawaii, and I worked in Hawaii for a year. It's not that bad if you can save up like some money, if they don't pay for your moving expenses. If you increase the field of your job search, it makes it way easier to get a job. Because imagine living in Walla Walla with a population of 34,000, or 34,000. Gonna be hard to find a job, but if you the more you expand your search, it becomes like exponentially easier to find a job. And for my wife's case, there's not really that much I can say about it. We lived in Hawaii, and she was working there up until we moved back to Seattle. So we moved back to Seattle, and there's a whole friggin' bunch of jobs here. So like there's not much I can say. There's jobs in Hawaii too, but there's more in Seattle, and the pay is higher. So basically we just moved to the Seattle area, and she was able to find a job like really fast. I think she only applied for, I tried to help her like get a job, by the way, but she found the job by herself, and she applied to it by herself with her own resume, and then she ended up getting hired. But I think she sent out like 4 or 5 applications. I don't know if it's lucky or just because there's like so many jobs here or what, but her job hunt was like really fast. But also Seattle, ton of jobs here. So yeah, that's step 5. And then the very last step is the interview preparation phase. So while you're applying for jobs, you want to be practicing for the interview. And it doesn't matter which job it is, like you can still practice for interviews before you actually get the interview. And I would highly recommend this, by the way. So what I would do is I would gather a whole bunch of questions, as many as you can find. Actually, I'm gonna put some in the description, so feel free to use those. But you want to gather as many questions as you can and kind of go through the questions one at a time, and not only like know the answer to them, but you want to also practice speaking. Like you don't need another person to do this. You can just speak to yourself. But the whole point is to be able to articulate your thoughts really well for the interview and be able to say what you want to say without fumbling around too much. And you also want to kind of practice answering questions that you don't really know how to answer. Like maybe you can let the interviewer know and give like a similar answer and articulate the answer really well. But the whole point of this process is to get comfortable answering questions, get comfortable talking about yourself, get comfortable talking about certain technical topics, and then just practice articulating what you want to say for the interview. Because when the interview rolls around, if you're good at that stuff, it's just one less thing that you have to think about, and you're going to be less nervous. You're going to be able to talk better, and you're going to be able to answer more succinctly if you get all that practice out of the way before the actual interview happens. So what my wife did for this phase is we gathered like all these interview questions. And by the way, go ahead and like check the description. I'm going to put these in here so you can steal a copy for yourself. But we just got all these interview questions, and she just went through these like one at a time and then made sure she could answer it, comfortably. And then she practiced like articulating and speaking out the answer for like each one of these questions. And it was pretty helpful. It gave her like more confidence going into the interview, which was big for her because English is not her native language, especially. So I would recommend doing something similar, like stealing these even, making sure that you can answer each one of them. Like the point is not to memorize answers to interview questions, but the point is to get used to talking in an interview setting. So if chances are you're going to be asked at least like a few of these because there's so many. You would have already answered it to yourself before, and you developed skill in like answering it, and you become comfortable, so you don't have to worry about it so much when the time actually comes. So there's like a category tab of networking or personal questions. This doesn't look like a personal question, but yeah, kind of questions surrounding like your person, like your personality, or behavioral questions and other technical questions. And she had interviewed for like a SOC, like a security operations center. So there's some more like kind of security centric questions in this document also. So feel free to use that. That's how she did it. It helped her quite a bit, because like on her interview day she didn't even like seem nervous, which was cool. But yeah, practice is as much as you can. The more you do, the more it's going to help you for sure. The way this framework works is the more of these that you check off, like the more of these boxes that you check, the more likely you are to get hired, or the more likely you are to get the job that you want. For example, if you completed all of these things except for the application phase, you probably won't get hired somewhere, or it's going to be like really unlikely for you to get hired if you don't apply. Or for example, you could check all of these boxes except for the certification box. It's still possible. It's definitely still possible for you to get hired without a certification, but it's just more likely if you have one. Or if you check all of these boxes except for interview prep, it's possible that you have nice base knowledge, you're certified, you have experience, your resume is good, but your interview is so bad that you just don't get hired for whatever reason. So the idea is, the more of these boxes you check, the more likely you are to get hired somewhere. And that's how to get your first job in IT. So as far as timeline goes, it just depends like person per person. If you're not too busy, you can definitely do this in under 6 months. It just depends on how fast like the knowledge base, like phase 1, and then the certification phase 2 takes you. CompTIA A+, you can definitely, if you like really like buckle down and do it. Watch my video for strategy on how to pass that quickly. But if you really buckle down and do it, you can definitely do CompTIA A+ in 2 months, even 3 months comfortably. And then the rest of the steps, they're pretty easy to implement, or at least they don't take as long as the actual certification phase. But yeah, Cool. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any feedback, just let me know in the comment section. And if you have any questions, please ask me in the comments. I'll make sure to answer everybody. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or just send me a normal LinkedIn connection request. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. 登録しなさい。